We are now nearing the end of Chapter 4. And so in Chapter 4 so far, you've learned some really important things. You've learned about debit-credit theory and the importance that every transaction must have a debit and must have a credit, and that the debits and credits for every transaction must equal. We also learned about creating these ledgers or these T accounts to record our transactions, where the left side of the ledger has a debit and the right side of the ledger is a credit. Remember the song? And so now we're recording our transactions in the ledger. And you also learned how to total up the account balances in the ledger. So you know now how to calculate the final balance in a bank account, in accounts payable, and in owner's equity, and so on. So here's my question to you. What happens if you make a mistake in the ledger? Let's say you record an entry on the wrong side, or you forget to record, you recorded part of the entry but not you recorded the debit but not the credit. What would happen? We know that debits must equal credits, but when we make these mistakes, and it's easy to make mistakes in accounting, if we make these mistakes in the ledger, we need to figure out how to find those mistakes. So we're on now to section 4.4 in your textbook, which is on trial balance. And so I love this image. I'm sure it's photoshopped, but this image of this elephant balancing on a beach ball, and that balance is the key to life. Well, it may not be the key to life. Well, it might be the key to life, but for sure it is the key to accounting. So balance is the key to accounting. Without things being balanced, we cannot do proper accounting. So let's look at our completed trial balance for, our completed ledger T accounts for Pacific Trucking. So you remember from our previous lessons that we went through this and we recorded these entries for each of these transactions, and we calculated these balances here. And so we know now here the bank has a debit balance of $215 and accounts receivable for Double Caruso is $150, and our Van Loon is a debit of $770, and we have our accounts payable account with a balance of $6,516, and so on. So my question to you is, what if we accidentally, we didn't record it on this side, but rather we recorded this transaction over here for $200. So we recorded it on the credit side for $200, and sorry, I've totally messed this up. Well, what would happen? Well, this would be $200 higher, so this would be $4,065, and this would be this would be $200 lower, so $3,600, and this would be $200 higher, and we'd actually end up with a negative balance of, $215. It actually would end up with a credit balance, and it would be on this side. So that's what would happen if we recorded that transaction on the wrong side. The other thing that would happen is that our debits would equal our credits. But we can't really tell that when we look at this. I mean, I've told you I recorded it on the wrong side, but when we look at this T accounts, is it easy to see if we've made an error in one of these transactions? And the answer to that is no, it's not easy. So we need to make a little tool. There's a tool called a trial balance. And a trial balance is simple. A trial balance is a very easy form that we fill out to check that lists all of our account balances. So it lists, and you need to write this down. So what I would do right now, pause me, fill in the blanks here, and then play me again so that you're not trying to listen and write at the same time, because I know that that doesn't work. So a trial balance is a form. It is a listing of all of our account balances found in the ledger, okay? And it's used to see that the total debits equal the total credits. So the point of the trial balance, this is the whole point of it, debits equal credits. That's the whole point of the trial balance. And this is really important. It does not find all the mistakes. It only allows us to see if the accounts balance. So it doesn't find every mistake in our ledger, but it definitely makes sure that our debits equal our credits. And the reason we want to make sure that our debits equal our credits before we move on in the accounting process is that after we're done recording transactions in the ledger, the next step would be to complete a balance sheet, an updated balance sheet for the company. But if the debits don't equal the credits, then our balance sheet's not going to work. So we need to do this intermediary step called preparing a trial balance. So let's look at a trial balance. I'm going to turn me off so you don't have to stare at my face. What is a trial balance? So here's a trial balance for Pacific Trucking for exactly what we just saw. So we've got our heading, the who, the what, and the when. Okay, and then we've got a list of our accounts. So we've got all our accounts. We've got our bank, accounts receivable, supplies, trucks, and equipment. Then we have our bank loan, our accounts payable, and our owner's equity. And we list them all. Every account that we have in the ledger, we list here. And so we want to make sure we've got our assets listed first. Okay, so our assets are listed first. And then our liabilities are listed second. I'm getting better at this pen. And then finally, our owner's equity is listed last in this situation. And once we've got all our accounts listed, we're then going to write the balances in. So notice here that our bank, right, the corrected one, had a debit balance of $215. So we're going to write that in the debit column. So the left-hand side column is debit, and the right-hand side column is credit. And so we're going to record all of our assets, and all of our assets in this situation have debit balances. And then our liabilities and our owner's equity have credit balances. So we're going to write those final totals in the right-hand column. Then the next step when we're done that is we're going to add up the debit column and we're going to add up the credit column. And these two numbers should equal. Okay? And if they don't equal, then we need to investigate why. So this document is an internal document. Okay, that just the accountants use in the business just to check that the debits equal the credits. So you can use abbreviations on this form, and you don't have to use the dollar sign. Okay, so notice there's no dollar signs here in our trial balance anywhere. You don't have to worry about that. But you do need to make sure that the column totals must agree. So here are the steps. So you can write down, again, pause me, write down the blanks, and then unpause me. So just like I said, step 1 is the heading, who, what, when. Step 2 is list all the accounts in order. Step 3, place the debit balances in the debit column and the credit balances in the credit column. Step 4, add up the two columns. And then step 5, compare the totals and ensure they agree. And if they don't agree, you need to investigate why. So figure out, why doesn't this balance? So, oh my gosh, what's going to happen now? So let's say you get your trial balance done, and let's say they don't agree. Let's say, I'm just flipped back to the one. So let's say this number was $90,049, and it was out of balance by $1,000. Well, you'd have to go and investigate why. So here's the steps that you're going to follow. So what happens if the, just wanted to make note too, sorry, backing up a bit. Taking off a trial balance, that's what it's called. When we prepare a trial balance, it's called taking off a trial balance. So we're taking the ledger accounts and we're taking off a trial balance. I just wanted you to make note of that because you might hear that term and I want you to know what it means. So when we're preparing a trial balance, we're taking off a trial balance. It's just some accounting terminology. So what if the trial balance doesn't balance? What do we do? Well, don't worry. Here are the steps you need to go through. So you're basically going to work backwards. So the first step you're going to do is we're going to check to make sure we re-added the trial balance properly. So we're going to make sure that we added this column, the debit column, and then we're going to re-add the credit column. Make sure that we didn't make a calculation error. So that's the first step. Okay, so step 1 is re-add the trial balance. Step 2 is to check that you've copied the balances from the ledger correctly. So did I record that 215 properly from the ledger? Did I record this number properly from the ledger, this number properly from the ledger? And I go through and make sure that I haven't made any typos as I've transferred the balances over. If that's not the error, then step number 3 says I need to recalculate the ledger. So I need to go back to those T accounts, okay, and I need to re-add the debit side and the credit side and make sure I didn't make an adding error when I was adding up the ledger totals. Okay, and if that if I don't find any errors that way, then I need to compare the totals and ensure, I need to check that there is a balanced accounting entry for every transaction. Okay, so again, I go back to here, this step here, and I check, okay, there's a number 2 here that's a debit, and there's a number 2 here that's a credit. And I do that for each transaction. And I make sure that my debits equal my credits, and I need to find the other number 5. And the other number 5 is right here, and they indeed add up, where my debits equal my credits. And that's where you'll find your errors. So there are 4 steps that you need to do to help you find your error, to ensure that you can balance your trial balance. And you need to balance before you can move on to doing your balance sheet. So I have a couple critical thinking questions for you to ponder and write down your answer, and I'm going to ask you tomorrow in class. So the trial balance is an important tool to make sure that the debits equal the credits, but even if the trial balance shows that the balances do equal and that the debits do equal the credits, does this guarantee that the ledger has no errors? And if so, if there could be errors in there, I want you to provide an example. So I want you to think about what situation could happen where the trial balance balances, but there's still an error. So the trial balance, the debits still equal the credits, but there is still an error in the ledger. How could that happen? Try to think of an example. Go back to this sheet here and see if you can figure out how an error could happen where the debits still equal the credits. And I'm going to challenge you tomorrow, and the person with the right answer, I will have a treat for you. Okay? Thank you for listening.